Welcome, 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 cycle breakers. Today we are talking about how to break the cycle, a step by step guide from the very beginning, figuring out what cycles do I even want to break, all the way to the point where you are not even a cycle breaker anymore. You're now a cycle maker, where you are building cycles of healing, resiliency, and growth for yourself, for your family, for your clients, for the world. Y'all, this is a good one. No stone left unturned with the time that we have today. I have my notes here. This is no PowerPoint. This is my authentic um step by step guide to support you along the way. All right. And so, for those who don't know me, I'm Kim Small. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, founder of Healing Insight Therapy and Wellness Collective, and our Cycle Breaker to Cycle Maker community. And over the past several years, I have supported folks through therapy, through consulting, through coaching, communities, individuals, with turning these cycles of trauma, isolation, overwhelm, loneliness, of intergenerational cycles, of personal cycles that have been repeating within yourself in a personal way, in a professional ways. I've been supporting folks in so many different capacities with turning these cycles into cycles of healing, resiliency, growth, clarity, leadership, and all with the goal of open-hearted living, loving, and leading. All right. And so I've been doing that as well as supporting a team doing the same. And because I've been doing that for so long, I really have gotten clear on really what it takes to break the cycle. Now, is there one way to break the cycle? This is the end all be all? Absolutely not. We all have a customized journey on this thing called life, and there are many paths to the same place. However, this is one path that has been very successful with lots of the folks that I work with. And so I'm going to share that with you today. Now, there may be aspects of what you need, right? Because everyone is unique. So there may be aspects of what you need that will be different than from what I need or what some of my clients need. And so as we go through, I'll be very clear with you around some of the ways that you may customize the rules or customize the guide, as well as reasons why you might break the rules or shift things around, and specific things that might be important for you to focus on based on your specific stage. So, if you are part of our wellness community, you already know this, but we have many, many tools and strategies and tips within our community designed to support you with breaking this cycle and to do it well, and also to get clear on where your starting place is. In fact, one of the starting places I recommend for everyone who's in our community is to take our Cycle Breaker to Cycle Maker quiz. It's very quick, less than 3 minutes. You'll answer some questions, and at the end, you will actually get a score. You'll get an overall Cycle Breaker to Cycle Maker score, as well as a breakdown for some of the specific additional areas that we're going to talk about today. So if you haven't already done that, I would love for you to take the quiz. It's very easy to get access. Click the link somewhere, maybe on the screen, in the bio, somewhere, to join our community. And one of the first prompts you'll get is to actually take that quiz. Um, Take it. It's just 3 minutes. You'll have that clarity, and the rest of this video is going to be even yummier for you. Okay. Will you get value from it if you don't take the quiz? Yes, but there's going to be some stuff that you may not have some of the nuance around. The quiz is going to give you a little bit more clarity to keep you in momentum, right? So, without any further ado, let's jump in, get your quiz results if you don't already have them. Yeah, so grab your quiz results if you don't already have them. Maybe have a journal nearby so you can take some notes and engage in some brief reflection. But yeah, let's jump in. So, let's see. So, the first thing that you want to do when it comes to, well, first of all, let me just back up a little bit because I want all of us to be on the same page. I've had a few other videos that kind of go into some details around this, why we struggle with our self care goals and what we need to do about it, as well as our video last week that talks about holistic mental health and how that might be the missing key to wellness in your life. And those are two things that you may want to know about in order to really understand the value of what I'm going to share with you. But I'll just summarize some things, right? If you are struggling with anxiety, loneliness, overwhelm in your life, confusion, guilt, shame, and these things have been keeping you trapped in patterns of your life, or you may not even know that, but I know that oftentimes those are things that are keeping folks trapped in patterns in their life, then we need to be able to break those cycles. However, the identity of a cycle breaker becomes unsustainable. So we need to eventually leave that identity behind and become that cycle maker where you're focused on making the yummy things, calling in the things that you want for yourself. Now, for folks who identify as cycle breakers, oftentimes there's some unique benefits to being a cycle breaker, but also some unique challenges that require extra special supports. We would all value and get benefit from these supports, but especially folks who identify as cycle breakers. Um, and for that reason, a holistic mental health approach is often recommended, required in order to sustain your wellness. So, if you are someone who maybe has broken a cycle in your life and then you find that the old cycle keeps pulling you back in, oftentimes it's a sign that at the point where you needed another resource, you didn't have that resource. It wasn't accessible for you. Holistic mental health, that framework essentially supports you um, with having tools and skill sets in across all 5 layers of yourself so that when one tool is not accessible to you, you have access to another. A brief example, I mentioned this a few times, but I injured my knee a few months ago, and the morning routine that I had included a daily walk, included stretching, lots of physical movement, and I was in a situation where for several days I couldn't even get out of bed. And so, because I had a holistic mental health approach to my life, even though I couldn't get out of bed, I used powerful visualization techniques, breath work techniques to visualize myself walking and getting, and I found that I got some of the same benefits that I would have otherwise. I felt more motivated in my system. And so when some of those thoughts kind of started to creep in about feeling stuck, taking backward movement, because I had other tools within other layers of myself, I was able to move forward. So those are some of the things that I want you to be aware of. One, it's not enough to break the cycle. We're actually becoming cycle makers. And two, taking a holistic mental health approach is often what's needed for cycle breakers to truly break the cycle and be able to sustain the new one. All right. And so, with that, let's jump into our actual plan. The first really part of the process is kind of identifying what cycles do you want to break in the first place, right? In what ways are you a cycle breaker? And so, there are 3 kind of categories of cycle breaking that I want to name. One of the cycles and that I want to name is intergenerational. So, what it means is that intergenerational cycle breaking are cycles that may have shown up in the generation before. So, maybe your parents, you were raised in poverty, your parents did not have a level of academic, educational, or financial attainment, right? That really felt good and was able to sustain your needs. And so you went on this journey of maybe becoming the first to go to graduate from high school, to go to college, to get an advanced degree, to purchase a home, to financially maybe break $100,000, to live in surplus instead of debt, right? That you are in the first generation of someone to accomplish something. It's not just financial, though. Maybe you have seen there was a cycle of alcoholism in your system and you're one of the first to live free of substances or not to be dependent on substances in order to sustain your life, right? And that's another cycle that you may be breaking. That's intergenerational cycles. And oftentimes, when we talk about cycle breaking, that's sometimes what comes to mind for people. But I actually find that even though that is a cycle in the grand scheme, the grand arc of life that is true and that cycle breakers tend to be present to, the cycles that we are most concerned about day to day are not necessarily that. Or even if it's connected in some way, we're not aware of that connection. What we're aware of are the cycles within our own lives, the habits that we've been trying to break, that we haven't been able to, the relationships that we continue to attract that we haven't been able to shift away from, right? So the cycles within our own life, since we have been conscious that we are trying to break. And then the third sort of category of cycle breaking that I want to name are this one comes with a bit more sort of nuance to it, but it's more about not about these big habits that are happening external to you, but more so about the internal cycles that are happening sort of within you. Actually, that's not really true. I feel like that kind of fits in category number 2. Yeah, let's say that's category number 2 still, right? The cycles that are showing up in your own life as well as the ones that are within you. But the other breaking cycle piece of it is about passing it on to the next generation, right? So we're trying to break a cycle in real time that maybe has been passed down from generation to generation, but the focus of that cycle is so that you can break it for the next generation, right? You want to break it for yourself, but it's about your kids as well, or it's about your clients, the folks that you're in leadership over. Maybe it's about the folks in your spiritual community. You're trying to help it go differently for them. All right. So those are three kind of categories of cycle breaking that are really important to know about. And so what I want to invite you to do is think about for each of these categories in what cycles are you aware of that you are hoping to break in your life. You can pause this video, take a moment and think about it, but really just notice what comes to mind. Intergenerational cycles. What cycles are you aware of that are showing up for you? Something that's important to note here is that many of us have cycles that we're aware of, but we also have cycles that we're not aware of, but that are still very much impacting us. And this is where I think it's called Jahari's window becomes very helpful. We always have a part of ourselves that other people know outside of us and that we also know ourselves. We also have a part of us that we know about that other people don't know about. Then we have a part of ourselves that other people know about, we don't know about. And we have a part that kind of exists almost unseen, even though it is an influencing factor that neither you know about nor do people outside of you know about, right? But the reality is, we have cycles showing up in each of these areas that are impacting us. And that is part of the reason why it can be so helpful to connect with community, um, to identify some of the cycles that you may not even know about that other people can see and identify for you. Why it can be helpful to do something like go to therapy or work with a coach to help you identify some of those blind spots. But of course, that's not going to address that fourth category that nobody knows about. But I want you to know there's still a way to access that. And that's where having processes for heightening your sense of awareness become very important. So if you are someone where you're looking and you're like, I something feels off, but I'm not even sure what cycles I want to break in my life. I'm not even sure what's going on. Or, I've seen some things, I'm aware of some things, but there's a sense that something is deeper. That's really a good hint that you may want to go on a self awareness journey. And typically, practices like mindfulness and other practices can support you with identifying some of that. So, as we go through, I will, if it feels relevant, talk about some of the practices that can help you with heightening that sense of awareness. But for now, just jot down whatever you are actively present to, knowing that there probably is more, and that gets to be okay. That will unfold as you move through this process. All right, so this is the big one. It's important, but this is really where we start. From there, One of the next steps that you want to do, and this is where your quiz results will be really helpful, is identify your starting point in the cycle breaker to cycle maker journey. So, one of the things I talk about in the community is we provide support all along your cycle breaker to cycle maker journey. And we really do. But we also know that your relationship with your journey is going to look and feel different based on where your starting point is. It's going to be different if you're just realizing, wait, I don't even know what cycles I want to break, as compared to someone who's like, I've been in my therapy bag for a while. I've been journaling. I've been doing the work for quite a few years, and I have a strong sense of what the cycles are, even if I'm not actually able to make the changes or sustain those changes in my life. And so, what we've done with this quiz is kind of identify four main categories in terms of stages, four main stages along the journey, and their individual stages in between these clusters that I'm going to share. And so, of course, the quiz is going to give you a bit more nuance on what that means. But just to give you a brief overview here, the first cluster is when you are sort of a pre-cycle breaker, where you haven't broken the cycles yet, you're just starting to get aware of what's going on. So of course that's going to be the earliest stages. In this stage, you don't have a whole lot of awareness, and I haven't said this before, but I want to say it now. Cycles are meant to repeat themselves. It's not like it's this terrible thing that you've taken on a cycle and you can't break it. That's what's supposed to happen. This is how we um, grow from a single cell into a fully fledged human that grows and develops over time. It's a cycle that repeats, repeats, and repeats and repeats. And eventually, some sort of differentiation happens. Someone goes off the beaten path, and all of a sudden, you go from a heart and you have a lung and you have a kidney and you have skin and muscles and all these, and a brain, right? All of these things expand out from there, but for most part, it's the same cycle repeating over and over and over again. So it's not an either or, it's a delicate balance of cycle breaking and cycle making. But in the early stages, what happens is those cycles that are rooted in are so committed to repeating themselves that you may sense early resistance, or you may shut down very, very quickly at the thought of even doing something differently than what you have always done. And so if you find yourself in this early stage of either pre-cycle breaking or the next cluster, which is early cycle breaking, then you really, really, really want to prioritize safety. Is my physical environment safe? And emotionally, am I safe enough to try on doing something new? And the reason is the brain craves two things: safety and predictability. If it doesn't feel safe and it can't predict what's going to happen next, it's going to shut things down. And that's not even about you. That's an automatic physiological process, which I can definitely talk more about. Just let me know in the comments if you want me to talk more about that. Actually, we did a series in our community on nervous system regulation, and it was all about that. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd be happy to share more, or you can get access to that inside the community. But when you're breaking a cycle, what we are doing is removing the predictability. We're doing something different. So the system can't predict it. And that's when safety becomes even more important. So if you have a lack of safety in your environment or internally, emotionally, now is the time to really up the volume on that. Okay. So that's that. Once you move beyond that stage, though, the next phase is when you're in active cycle breaking. You started taking some action. You've noticed, okay, there's some cycles, some things I need to do differently. You start setting some boundaries in your life. You start doing some things differently. And that's a great thing. The problem comes in where, because cycles are meant to repeat themselves, one of the ways it repeats themselves is from the people around us, the environmental cues. And so people around you see you doing things differently. It sends off alarm bells to their nervous system. Something's unpredictable. That might mean something is unsafe. We need to stop that so that we can get things safe again. So the people around you who you might hope would see this change in your life as a positive thing may not be able to, not because they don't love you, not because they don't care about you, but because that cycle is showing up as different in some way. Their nervous system's trying to put it back. So you may not have the support that you need. People might push back on your boundaries, and that creates a new stress that maybe you weren't expecting, or a new stress that just puts so much on your plate. If you don't have the resources around it, it can really shut you down, and the old cycle tries to pull you back in. So in this stage, I often say that it's important to engage in active healing processes to clear out clear out the those cycles in a way that your nervous system can hold, so that when friends and family, when they're not supporting as much as you hope they would, you at least have some things off of your plate, right? You have some things off of your plate so you can handle that discomfort, the stress that that might pose in the meantime. Also, one of my teachers often said, and this was actually when I was learning EMDR, one of the deep transformational healing modalities that I utilize with clients and therapy and coaching and all of that. And she said, "Hey, if you're in the middle of a tunnel and you see it's dark, it's scary, do you want to sit there in the middle of the tunnel and say, 'Oh, I'm scared. Oh, this is dark,' and notice every crevice and every shadow? Or do you want to go ahead, full speed ahead, get through that tunnel, get to the light at the end, right? Where you're outside as quickly as possible?" Most people, I think, would say, I want to get to what is possible. And that is what I have found to be successful as well. So if you're in this active cycle breaking phase, that's probably what you're going to want to do for yourself and will make the most impact. Get to the healing as quickly as possible. Now, um, what I just shared with you is great and all, healing is great and all, but what do we do about the thing that I just mentioned, which is the people around me, the people that I love and that I thought loved me back aren't supporting me, or my environment that was helpful to me pre-cycle breaking is no longer as supportive to me when I'm clear on what it is that I want and need in my life. How do I do that? Um, and so that is where this third cluster really comes in. This is when you're in a season, and this is an early stage cycle maker where you are actively cycle breaking and cycle making at the same time. So you haven't completely broken the cycles yet, but but you are beginning to understand that you have to create something new, right? You have to create new environments that do support who you are becoming and this new identity. You have to access new relationships that are aligned with the version of you that you are becoming, or where you want to go, and not invested in seeing and understanding you as who you have been. All right. And so that's why the core need here is community care with like minded cycle breakers, with cycle makers. And full transparency is the big reason why our community exists. So, one thing to know about me is that I actually specialize in working with helping professionals, wounded healers, and heart centered entrepreneurs. And the through line of those three communities is oftentimes they know they are helping others from a place of knowing what it's like to need help themselves. They are really embodying that cycle breaker energy. But the problem comes in where when there's a failure in the professional sense, that failure doesn't just feel like, oh, I messed up, I made a mistake. It also feels like I failed my lineage, I failed my ancestry, or I failed myself on a really deep level. Maybe I imposter syndrome comes in. Maybe I'm not set out to do this work or to heal in this way. In the early stages, it can really sound like that. And so I realized the antidote, right? As a therapist, I can sit across from you, or even a coach, I can sit across from you and encourage you and share, maybe how I see you, which may be different than that, and all of that. But until you see somebody who's in it, who's right at the place where you're at, share a similar worry and concern about themselves, and you can look across from them and say, I don't see you that way. That's when it begins to click, because you're like, wait a minute. If you can be going through this, the same thing that I'm going through, you're feeling all this way, and I'm saying, I don't see you that way. I see you as just as worthy as you've always been. Then at some point, this thought about yourself, I'm not worthy, and this thought, but they are worthy, even though it's the same situation, they touch. And the cognitive dissonance has to do something. It diffuses and eventually says, well, maybe I'm worthy too. That's something that happens in community. And that's why I often say community is the medicine. So if you find yourself in this portion of the journey where you're actively cycle breaking and cycle making at the same time, community is the primary medicine. You still need safety, right? You still need that deep transformational healing. And so if you haven't done that before, now is really the time to also make that important. But community becomes especially important when you see yourself really working on establishing new things. Okay. And so the fourth cluster is actually as a sort of more established cycle maker. Now you've been doing this work for a while. Maybe you've done some of the healing stuff. Things are starting to feel good. And actually, you have more energy, you have more capacity for showing up for others. What I find is important in this phase is integrating the healing that you may have identified in one area and being able to expand it to other areas of your life. So, for example, if the main issue that was showing up in your life was around the way that you treat yourself and developing a self compassion practice, the next step or elevation of that may be oriented to expanding that to your friendships, your relationships, or to your professional life. And how do you show up with compassionate boundary setting? It may look like expanding to how do I begin to treat the environment with compassion, right? How do I begin to treat my ancestors with compassion? For example, that's how we begin to expand it. The other area is beginning to understand your setbacks, the same setbacks that you maybe blamed and shamed yourself for in the past, or maybe they're different setbacks, but you thought, I've done all this healing work. I shouldn't still be having setbacks. Shifting your relationship with that, instead of seeing it as setbacks or problems to be solved, you begin to understand yourself just in the way like the breath or like seasons, right? And so just in the way we inhale and we exhale, we do that all the time, and that's a normal part of the breath practice, right? Just like seasons have their own summer, winter, spring, and fall, we have these natural seasons of expansion and contraction. So do you. And what might it be like to understand those seasons in your life, to build those seasons out bit by bit? And to make space for that in the way that you plan vacation time, in the way that your routine shifts, in the way your food, the food that you consume may shift from season to season in your life, right? And for some people, that might actually be aligned with the seasons. And for other people, there might be something slightly different going on, but really tapping into and understanding your unique seasons. In order to do this well, this is really an intuitive thing, a more integrated thing. And so one of the other things that we really do at this point is begin to understand yourself in terms of the five layers of self. You may find that you tend to gravitate towards the mental and emotional. Makes sense. Most of us do because our society values that most. But you may choose to intentionally focus in on how can I bring my physical body more into this work? How can I be more present to and able to manipulate the energy in my system, right, to support me with taking action? How do I grab hold of spiritual resources and take hold of spiritual practices that support me with manifesting things into my life? And so that's another part of cycle maker energy. What are the main things that you might need if you find yourself at that established cycle maker is habits and routines around rest and joy and creativity. These things that may be decentered in our society for most people, but become very, very important. These are intuitive ways of being, these are embodied ways of being that we are grounding in. These are the tools that support us when we are stepping into leadership and we're doing more for others. These are the things that stop us from burning out because we are consistently pouring into our own cup, allowing us to serve others from a place of overflow, y'all. And so, what I'm sharing with you, this is how you break the cycle. These are the stages that you move through. As I've shared this, I'm so curious to know, how are you feeling having heard this? Which of the four clusters do you identify with? That early cycle breaker stage, maybe even pre cycle breaker? The active cycle breaking stage, the early stage cycle maker, where you're breaking cycles and making them at the same time, and holding the weight of those feels kind of heavy and a lot, right? Or maybe you're on that established cycle maker side where you're doing more gentle, more intuitive shifts, but what you're doing is creating sustainability in your life. I said this before, but I'm going to say it again. The goal here is open hearted living, loving, and leading. And you may be in a season of your life where open-hearted living is all you can take on and you're not ready for leadership, right? Or where you're oriented on the relationships that are in your life, and that all gets to be okay. But what I want to affirm you is that no matter where you are on this journey, all of these things, doing these things for yourself, is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Now, I'm thinking about those of us who sometimes really struggle with showing up for ourselves and prioritizing that work for ourselves, because you're so used to doing for others. Even if you see that it tends to lead to burnout, even if you see that it's not sustainable, that old storyline can be so deeply ingrained that it's hard to break through. And so this part of it is for you. It's for all of us, but especially for you. If you're feeling that way, this is one of the best ways to do your work in the grander scheme of work in our goal in accomplishing our goal of collective liberation, which says, I'm not free until we're all free. Because when you consistently show up for yourself to the point where you're able to operate from overflow, guess what? You become more sustainable in doing the work that you do. You have more resources to pass on to others. And even those setbacks that you thought were setbacks end up supporting other people because they can see the way that you handled it. Or they can see, even if you didn't handle it well, right? You now have the wisdom that you can go back and share with them on these things matter. These things matter. And it also impacts you because when you go back and you're like, wow, that thing that sucks so bad that I wish I never went through, because I went through it, I'm now able to show up from this for this other person, and I'm able to help them avoid that challenge, or able to help them move through it more quickly, or I'm able to help them finally get unstuck. That is oftentimes the fuel that motivates those of us that sort of identify with that cycle breaker energy and what we're wanting to do. The problem is when we end up doing it when we are in that early cycle breaker stage and we can barely do it for ourselves, it becomes unsustainable, it becomes problematic. And sometimes in that place, we end up giving advice and support that is actually slightly out of alignment. When we do it from this place, from cycle maker energy, right? We are in alignment with ourselves. We have enough self awareness to understand the difference between our intuition and our triggers. So we're not unintentionally offloading our stuff onto other people. And that's such an important part of this journey. And I want you to experience that. I think we all deserve to experience that. All right. And so that is how you break the cycle and what needs to happen. But I want to go even further and give you with some level of specificity what it is that you can actually do. Now, last video, I actually talked about how you create a holistic mental health action plan. And so that is going to support you. If you go back there, it's going to give you some more clarity on how to actually create the plan. But I want to talk about, based on the stage that you're in as we go through that plan, some things that you may want to think about. So, for our 4 phase roadmap to transformation, beneficial to you regardless of what stage in the cycle breaker or cycle maker journey you're in, this is, you want to think about this less like a concrete path. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and then you're done, right? Your cycle maker energy. You want to think about this more like a repeating fabric of DNA. A repeating strand of DNA that's repeating over and over and over and over and over again. And there are what is it? Amino acids? Not amino. Oh Lord, it's been a while since I've taken like a biochem or a biology class. It's not amino acids. What's the other one? Ooh, somebody help me out. Wow, I got to do a little bit review. But whatever the ACG, ATCG, whatever those guys are. Oh, the pieces of the DNA strand. That's more so what this is. But instead, we have the plan, the power, the process, and the practice. So the plan gives you your where ultimate gives you clarity on where it is that you want to go, and also gives you a brief foundation to make sure that you have the capacity to actually get there, right? So it carves out the minimum viable things that you need to do in order to help you with getting there. The power phase is the fuel for your system that allows you to be successful, and it clears out shame, builds up worthiness, and also supports you with preparation so you have all the knowledge and skills that you need to actually engage in your level up. Your process is where you actually do the level up. You actually do the healing. You actually do the expansion work that you need. You actually learn how to take on a rest practice, for example. Whatever that is for you in this season, the processing phase is all about that. And then the practices, these are the everyday, every week practices that are going to support you. They're not things that you maybe have to do every single week in a routine. There might be things that you pull from, you do, and you utilize as needed to support you with integrating your level up into all these areas of life and across all 5 layers of who you are. And as you move into authentic living, loving, and leading, right? So these are the practices that you take with you for that. Now, if you want access to a holistic mental health action plan template that walks you through how to create a plan that encompasses all of that, the plan, the power, the process, and the practices, then you can actually find that in our free community. Just click join the community, and within your cycle breaker or cycle maker kit, you will be able to access that. Now, with that plan, of course, you want to take that into action. So you want to also prepare yourself for taking action by making sure that everything that you feel you need to do, you have coverage for the kids, for example. You have the resources. Is it a journal? You have the therapist that has the capacity to help you heal on the level that you need to, or you have the coach that's able to help you strategize around accomplishing your specific goal in this next season of your life, right? Making sure that you have the resources that you need, making sure that it's on your schedule and things like that, and having the community support to hold you accountable, where you can say, this is what I'm going to do, and you can come back and say, I did it, and you can get that celebration. And if something went wrong, you have somebody checking on you like, hey sis, how's it going? Right? This is what we want. This is what I want for you. This is what I think many of us all want. And so I hope that this has helped you get more clear on what cycles you need to break in your life or you want to break in your life, helps you get clear on where you are in the cycle breaker to cycle maker journey, and has gotten you a lot more clarity on what needs to happen in what needs to be included in any plan that you make for healing, for maintenance, for wellness in your life. All right, y'all. That is all for now. Until next time, keep going. Your healing is in sight. And of course, if you want to connect with me, the best way to do that is inside of our Cycle Breaker or Cycle Maker community. If you have questions about the plan, if you want to take that Cycle Breaker or Cycle Maker quiz, if you want to start working your plan with accountability, community, and support, y'all, it's popping inside there. I have to say, we are attracting a community of over 500 cycle breakers turned cycle makers, just really committing to lifting as they climb. So I cannot wait to see you inside there. Take care.